Welcome once again to the new Lifeboat Hour. We're so glad you could join us today as we continue to offer you tools, options, and ever-refreshing perspectives on navigating climate chaos, economic meltdown, endless wars, and the despair and numbness that pervade the cultures of industrial civilization. Our intention at the new Lifeboat Hour is to offer a place where you can connect with guests and conversations that will inspire and fortify you in these very daunting times. We will never tell you that everything is going to be all right, because it isn't, but we will walk with you through the territory where humanity has never been and where it may indeed meet its demise. Whatever the outcome, it's important for all of us that we not be alone and that we have validation as we walk in these very two different and often crazy-making worlds. Back in 2013, I received an email from a student at the University of Kentucky who invited me to visit his campus and offer some of my workshops to his activist community. I was pretty stunned because of the out-of-the-blue nature of the invitation from someone I had had no previous connection with. So in December 2013, I visited Lexington, Kentucky, and offered workshops there, but more importantly was profoundly moved by my interactions with Tyler Hess and his friends, who so warmly took me into their world and revealed much about themselves and their generation. Since then, I've remained in contact with Tyler and invited him to be a guest on the old Lifeboat Hour a couple of years ago. And I'm really enjoying watching his evolution and his ever-deepening relationship with the Earth and his commitment to counter all of the things that are profoundly threatening the Earth community. Tyler is one of my teachers in terms of letting me have a clear perspective of his generation, which is at a very opposite end of the continuum from mine, of course. And I'm delighted with his willingness to give me that perspective. So I'm thrilled today to once again engage in a public conversation with Tyler Hess. Tyler, welcome to the new Lifeboat Hour.
Gratitude, Carolyn. I really appreciate our relationship.
Me too. So tell us where you're living right now, because I try to keep up with you on Facebook, but I'm not always sure where you are.
Sure. The last time we talked, I was living in Southwest Wisconsin at New Forest Farm, a beautiful healing land base of 100 acres of chestnut trees, hazelnuts, apples. And I left there last June due to some social situations, and gave away my nursery, my herd of pigs, and flew west with a one-way ticket. Last July, actually almost 1 year ago this week.
Wow.
And landed in the Bay Area for a series of several workshops, notably Joanna Macy's 10-day Work That Reconnects. Mm-hmm. And then I went on a 2-week fast with the School of Lost Borders, kind of a youth vision fast. Mm-hmm. And that series of interactions led me to residing in Southern California in a town called Ojai. Mm-hmm. For 6 months. I resided at a permaculture community called East End Eden. It was 6 or 7 of us planting trees, tending goats, building houses out of natural materials, rehydrating the watersheds of Southern California. And that relationship transitioned this past April. And I'm now showing up in service at Canticle Farm, a community of initiation in the East Bay in Oakland. It's been operating for the last 10 years or so. There's 6 houses that share 2 blocks. We busted down all the fences. We have beautiful gardens growing. Mm-hmm. The community is a fusing of 3 main principles. First is environmental stewardship and food sovereignty, revolving around natural medicine and urban gardening. The second is social and economic justice, particularly with regard to racial healing, reparations, and restorative justice, alternatives to the prison system. Yeah. And the third pillar being faith-based leadership, spirituality, integral traditions, blending the mystical ways. And so there's about 20 to 25 of us here that share physical and intellectual space with community dinners weekly, garden work parties. And this all allows a lower cost of living so that a lot of the people here can do their soul work,
Right.
which was really the intention of the founders here, Anne and Terry Simmons Bucher, to really welcome youth and people of all ages to reconnect to their path and their contract on the earth, to carry this out. So I've been gratefully living here for the past 2.5 months now, and am loving the warm Bay Area.
Yeah, the very warm Bay Area these days.
Yes.
Yeah, and I got a chance to sort of look as you were walking into the house. I got a chance to see a little bit of your garden, and it just looks absolutely awesome. And you told me before the podcast that one of the things that's really alive for you is culinary healing and the farm food gut connection. So I'd like you to talk about that, please, and take as much time as you like.
Totally. Well, back in 2010 and 11 was when I first encountered your work and Michael Ruperts' Wilderness blog. And I was on a path then of becoming a lawyer. Like, if only I sued the bad guys, then
Right.
then the benevolent civilization would be healed, and we would all be able to still go to the grocery and the movies. And instead, I saw that what was unraveling, where could I play a part in? And food has really taken my heart over these last 7 or 8 years as the locus and the center point, the dinner table as the gathering of all culture. And so in that pursuit, I dropped out of my law school program, my privileged education system, and have been farming and apprenticing to the land and with other land cultivators for the last 6 or 7 years. That means growing really high quality, nutrient dense vegetables, meats, weaving crafts and herbal medicines together. But doing that in isolation in the forest has been a bit of an escapist strategy for me. And not always would people actually be able to receive the vegetables into their lives and in their bodies when their social and relational situations didn't allow for that food to really nourish them. So what I'm doing now is, instead of just going from soil to refrigerator or pantry, I'm really working on going from soil to soul, so that people, as we heal the land and we offer beautiful nourishment, we can take it all the way into our bodies and our spirits and become healed as beings, as bodies, to carry out our good work in the world. That means fusing the gardening work with the preparation work. So what kinds of things are healing to our bodies? And I don't have a particular dogma with diet, but I'm learning how to live a more plant-based lifestyle with higher quality animal inputs if I do consume dairies or meats. And when I cook things, do I remember to soak the grains and the legumes first? Or do I not combine a bunch of heavy sugar with leafy greens, because the way the digestion works, that doesn't help? Or do I mix in a lot of probiotics and sauerkrauts? And so this has been my own journey out in the farm fields and in our kitchens, when we just have high quality vegetables to prepare. But now I'm bringing it into these communities where I live, and particularly the warriors of the new story, the people trying to shift our cultural paradigm. And so beautifully, for the past year, I've been kind of serendipitously guided to be a part of kitchens at gatherings. It started a year ago in August, when I came back from my vision fast. One of the guides of that, Will Scott, who founded an amazing program called Weaving Earth out here in Sonoma County, a blend of bird language, permaculture, tracking skills, inner relationships, group facilitation, spiritual ritual. He recommended I cook at a gathering called The Art of Mentoring. That was a gathering of 400 people. I was thrown into the kitchen, and who knew I could chop quickly and make great salad dressings just intuitively, because that's what I'd been doing on farms. So then that led to cooking at another gathering, and people heard about that. And when I was living in Ojai, we hosted a 3-week-long class, and we were going to hire some kind of outside cook, but I volunteered to step up. And so living at my home there, I cooked for 3 weeks for 30 people, 3 meals a day.
Wow.
And we did it on such a low budget, using local gleaned vegetables, our own pork and goat milk. So there's been various spiritual initiations in some way that, like, I've been offered these opportunities, and now increasingly I'm being hired and asked to show up in service to these places, usually not on a transactional relationship of like per hour I get paid this, but rather I'm there to nourish the site. Just recently I was the head cook for Joanna Macy's 10-day Work That Reconnects gathering in June of 2017, whereas I attended as a full participant last year in 2016. And this year I helped to fuse her spiral and her emotional work with the work of the food, so that certain foods would show up at certain times. And when we had our big fear and anger transformation ritual, there was a warm rose petal honey tea and chocolate to calm their heart down, and some comforting, vegan coconut oil mashed potatoes, and so that they had a bit of comfort food after that experience. And what are the ways that food is medicine, that food can be healing for our bodies, and that if we put high quality nourishment into us, that what comes out of us through our hands, our hearts, our mouths can be just as nourishing for the world. And that linkage to where the health of our land and thus the health of our gut becomes the health of our heart, I think is a way that those who are ready and those who are serving the new story can really show up in a higher way.
Well, thank you for all of that. I guess what I'm impressed by is the way you have really consciously linked all of those connections, farm, food, gut, and the incredible nurturing mission that you're on with food. I feel nurtured just listening to you talk about it. It's just amazing. And you mentioned the word initiation, and I'm going to ask you more about that in a little bit. But first, I just want to mention something else. You've mentioned Joanna Macy's work several times, and I recall that when I flew into Lexington on a cold December night several years ago, I recall that you were sitting in the waiting area reading my book, Collapsing Consciously, a book about collapse that offers, as the subtitle says, transformative truths for turbulent times. Yeah. And, it looks at collapse through a very spiritual lens. And I was impressed with your longing at that time and now to do deep soul work and experience what you call inner emotional alchemy. And I know that those are all very alive in you right now, and perhaps even more so than when we met. So please share with us what on that journey is most alive for you right now.
Thank you. Yes. Long ago, I thought that the structures of society needed to change, and then everybody would be happy. If only we got the right president or political candidate in office, then that would save us. And I recognize the need for structural reform in so many ways. And I've begun to recognize that inner work and self-direction is a powerful way to show up in the world. That begins with working through our own stories, our own traumas. That begins with simple things like the 4 agreements of not making assumptions, of being impeccable with our word, of doing our best, and not taking things personally. And then creating practices like are in Collapsing Consciously that we can use to transform our stories. In the last few years, in using Joanna's spiral as an example, beginning my days with gratitude, or when I'm in a tense situation, what am I grateful for? What are the blessings I've already received? moving to honoring our pain, can we still collectively witness the fear and the anger and the despair, like dark gold shows me? And I remember reading that 2 years ago, being like, I'm allowed to look at my shadow. I'm allowed to use that as transformative material.
Yes.
The darkness can be the gold. Like if we actually honor our pain for the world, as Joanna says, then the darkness can be gold.
Right.
We have to collectively witness and see it. And then the third step of the spiral, seeing with new eyes, we can begin to see what is the gold of that. What are the gifts? Can our despair for the world actually be an insight to our deep love of the world? Can our fear of coming and present darkness actually be our care and compassion for our neighborhoods and our families? And when we see with new eyes that industrial agriculture, the new eyes of that is the perennial permaculture. When we see with new eyes the death row and prison injustice complex, can we see restorative justice in community healing circles? Like, then we move into the fourth step of going forth. Once we see with our alivened self, is there a way to go forth into our work? And so inner emotional alchemy to me means really seeing our stories and the way we've been brought up in the world, the way I was raised in a sheltered suburban white Catholic household and created certain traumas around sexuality and touch and race and et cetera, et cetera. How else do other people show up? What are their limiting beliefs? And how can we work together to transcend these blockages to show up in our higher forms? So it looks differently for everyone, and it's tricky for me to talk about this in generalities because everyone is their own being and story walking in the world. But I really am valuing more the feelings and emotional states of people, not just which candidate they voted for or which local food they bought at the store, or if they have organic oranges on their shelves, these kinds of surface level judgments that may have been part of me in the past. I really want to meet people where they're at in their journey and just offer a bit of medicine that they can realize that, as our mutual friend Michael Mead says, like, we're all geniuses.
Yes.
Last August, actually, I was at his men's retreat in the Redwoods, thanks to your encouragement, actually. I had that on my radar, and I called them just 2 days before, or I called them in the summer when you let me know, and I said, I can't afford that. I don't know if I'm available. And they said, well, it's already full. We'll put you on the waiting list. And the day before the gathering, they said, you were number 70 something on the waiting list, but you're the only one that said yes with only 1 day's notice. So I went up to the forest and gathered with Michael, and what I learned from that was just the power and potential of every being is so huge. Yeah. And we're still unfolding to our ultimate potential. And so if I can help people recognize and catalyze their inner genius, like I'm doing with myself, then that's part of that emotional alchemy, so that we can really work our insides and get clearer, so that then we can do the good work on the outside.
Well, you're blowing me away with the things that you're telling me right now in terms of, I'm just really standing in awe. And one of the things that I'm particularly standing in awe of is the courage you have to look at the darkness, the courage you have to, stand back, step away, and know that, this is so much of the inner work is about the transformation of ego and the blossoming and the blooming of the divine self, and your willingness to use the darkness as a vehicle, which so few people in this culture are willing to do. I think you said a moment ago, we can't see the light fully until we've seen the darkness. And I really appreciate that. Yeah.
I think you told me that quote originally, like, and you may have used it in your book with Andrew recently about the greater the pain, the greater the joy, the greater the
deeper
grief.
the sorrow, the greater the joy. Yeah, that's a William Blake quote from a long time ago. Yeah. Today I'm speaking with Tyler Hess, a millennial friend and teacher of mine whose passion for healing the Earth community and humans has compelled him to follow a path different from that of many other members of his generation. He's one of the many fascinating and inspiring guests that the new Lifeboat Hour brings you every time we create a podcast. I constantly receive feedback from folks who tell me that sometimes they just like to listen or re-listen to one of our new Lifeboat Hour podcasts because they don't want to feel alone with what they know, or they want to feel validated at a particularly stressful time and need affirmation of their commitment to tell the truth to themselves and the world. We make these podcasts as a labor of love for the community, and we would ask that when you download or listen, you leave a donation as an expression of your gratitude for this work. And as I say each week, I do this work for you, my friends, and for all living beings. I'm talking today with Tyler Hess, and Tyler, I'm also aware that you're drawn to spiritual and emotional work that focuses on providing rites of passage and transformation for youth. So I'd love it if you'd share with us why that calls you, and if you've been able to participate directly in that sort of work.
Excellent. Well, thank you for offering this podcast to people. I appreciated your brief note there about you doing this for all beings, and I have felt so comforted by your steady presence offering this to the community. And I've undergone somewhat of a rites of passage myself over the recent years, an initiation into adulthood. And my parents have done their best, and I needed other elders like you to see and validate my fears of the darkness and my longings for a more beautiful world. And so I recognize the space you've held, and I'm wanting to do that with others.
Yes.
It particularly came up for me last year. I was referring to it earlier in a vision fast with the School of Lost Borders, an organization that was founded 40 years ago by Stephen Foster and Meredith Little, who ended up helping Bill Plotkin and the Animas Valley Institute get started. And Stephen and Meredith actually met at a suicide hotline, and were getting calls from all these young people that were in crisis because they didn't have a way to transform and be seen by elders, go into the wild world of inner and outer wilderness. And so they recognized the need and the gap in Western civilization for rites of passage.
Yeah.
There's these birth, marriage, funeral kind of loose rituals that we've created. And when it comes to adulthood to elderhood, as well as from youth to adulthood, there's been a gap. And so I recognize that in myself, and as a part of various people recommending this program, I went on a quest called Coming of Age in Changing Times, a vision fast for young adults. And I really felt these changing times for so many years, and I wanted to commune deeper with my own self out in the desert without books and journals, and it ended up being the pinyon pine and the juniper forest in Death Valley and in the Inyo Mountains, which is near the oldest living beings on earth, the bristlecone pine forest.
Yeah.
These are 4,200-year-old trees, and we communed with this landscape. First, there's a 3-part to a quest, a severance, an initiation, and an integration or incorporation. And so of the 12 days, 4 days we talked about what are we severing from, what are we letting go, what are we releasing about our old stories, our old selves, our old ways of being that doesn't serve us any longer. And we affirmed that. We said that ourselves. This wasn't domineered or told to us. It was a group process. We used the way of counsel, formulated down by Jack Zimmerman and Gigi Coyle at the Ojai Foundation. That beautiful process of a talking stick, of listening from our heart, speaking from our heart, being lean of expression, and being spontaneous. These principles and social group processes helped hold me and 10 other young people in the desert to really let go of our old. And then we were prepared for the fast. For 4 days, 4 nights, we were alone out in the Inyo Mountains, hours and hours from any concrete road. I mean, it was quite a trek to get there. And that kind of aloneness allowed me to commune with the oneness. And that relationship, the morning of the 5th day on that sunrise, I have such fond memories of like the gratitude of being alive, and then the miso soup feast that, recolonized my gut after that. Then for 4 days, we all sat in sacred ceremony to tell our stories. The 4 questions we were really asked was, who went out there? Who came back? What did you bring back? And what are you here to serve the community now?
Oh, wonderful.
And so these kinds of questions were so inspiring to me. And I was so touched by this ritual that Will Scott and Trebby Johnson, another new mentor for me, Radical Joy for Hard Times. She said she seems in a similar trajectory as you as well, in the sense of our active joy that we need. And I actually participated in her Global Earth Exchange this year with honoring wounded places. And so I went to a clear-cut old growth redwood stump during Joanna's workshop, and we sang to that stump and let it know that we were grateful for its life and that we're here to honor it now and to plant a new earth. And I am only inspired by these things because of having met these people on this initiation.
Right.
That personal story just serves to show the larger crisis of youth that we're in. I often go back to my brother's fraternity house in college back in Kentucky, and the booze and sports, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with a bit of biodynamic wine or some playful games sometimes, and yet to the loss of story and true mentorship, and particularly a healthy divine masculine image for these boys to look up to. I remember being there many years ago, and I see that crisis, and I see the potential for me to serve young boys these days, to let them know that it's okay to be vulnerable and cry, that it's okay to question your gender or sexuality. It's okay to apologize. That doesn't mean you're weak. These simple things that I really started learning at a youth summer camp in Vermont a few years ago. Just the summer after we met, I graduated from school and went to this camp, and these kinds of serendipitous story weavings I'm really starting to see as interconnected, so that my initiation obviously helped me, but now it's called me into a higher form of service.
Yeah. And
so in some way, I'm not yet linked with an organization in particular or founding anything myself, but I'm showing up for more youth programs, seeing the wisdom in the eyes of these young beings that are incredibly courageous souls to incarnate at this time.
Yes.
And so how can I be an example of a young man myself, to give them something to look forward to and to create some sacred ritual so that they can transform their inner stories, somehow, some way. I'm learning as I go.
Well, thank you for all of that. And, I just want to tell you, remind everyone of what you know so well, Tyler, is that there's that personal context of initiation that you're talking about, there's also the planetary initiation that we're all going through right now. And so to have that understanding of initiation, rites of passage, is so important so that we can make sense of and be able to wrap our hearts and minds around what's happening on our planet, that we are going through this deep underworld rite of passage that is pulling us down into tremendous suffering and even potential extinction, and very likely extinction. And here we are, going through this right now. And I love those questions: who went out? Who came back? What did you bring with you? And what are you going to do to serve? I mean, those are the 4 questions that certainly live in me right now, and I know live in you big time.
Oh, I really resonate with how you weave that, because I'm thinking of the work by Daniel Pinchbeck. He just published a book called How Soon Is Now? Global Transformation and Personal Initiation, to where he really calls in that this is a planetary initiation moment. Yeah. And we need personal initiation moments so that people can radically and non-linearly wake up to their true purpose.
Yes.
And so I really see this personal and planetary happening simultaneously for all of us, not just youth. I'm walking my parents through their own initiations with their diets and their lifestyles. And I meet people all the time that are waking up to their truer purpose. And so I really appreciate that fusing, because these times that we're in, I just want to recognize and validate that we've never been here before in human history.
Absolutely.
I mean, to see the CO2 charts that kind of bop up and down for hundreds of thousands of years, but never really go over 300. And then all of a sudden we're at 400 now. This is a completely unique time, and with climatic feedback loops. And I was actually just with Dar Jamal. He attended Joanna's intensive.
Right.
And I was sharing space with him there, and he's influenced me for so many years with his climate report backs and with interviews on the Lifeboat Hour. So I'm acutely aware of the calamities that are upon us and that are growing by the minute and year. And that makes me even more committed to doing my work, so that whatever energy remains, from single cellular to some complex beings to a little bit of morphogenetic field of the previous humans, that it's a little cleaner and a little higher, and that we actually look at this darkness as it happens and not avoid it.
Wow, thank you for that. So amazingly true. There's another theme that is very much alive in you, what you call sexual liberation and sacred intimacy. And rather than asking you specific questions about these, I'd just like you to talk about them, and let's see where that goes.
There is a life force that created us all.
Yeah.
I've heard the quote that there are 2 types of people in the world: mothers and their children. And we are all mothers to the new paradigm in some way, birthing a new humanity, a new story. And in particular, I think of my basic understanding of the Hindu stories of creation around the divine oneness splitting into 2 so that it could make love, and that the world was actually birthed by Shakti and Shanti making love for 10,000 years, which is quite the cosmological beginning. And in some ways it comes all the way to the 20th century with Sigmund Freud and his awareness of the power of the libido, and obviously his myriad misunderstandings and projections still comes to a recognition that the life force that spawns all life is so powerful, and that I believe we've all had a drive, a sexual drive in our beings, in our bodies, in our spirits, in our souls. And so what is that life force? Where does it come from? This really motivates me because everyone has it. Just like we all eat and we need a nourishing gut bacteria balance, just like we all feel and cry and we need a nourishing emotional life, I believe that we all, at some point in our life, have lust and relationship desires and an affinity for closeness and intimacy. And I know at least my primary love language is physical touch. And so, or is it words of affirmation, or is it physical gifts? What are the ways that we relate and share intimacy as beings? Particularly because I was raised in a repressed household in some way, a Catholic, abstinent only sexual education in my private schooling. I feel like recent years have made me burst out of the bars of that confinement and recognize myself as a sexual being. And now I'm in a time of sacred moderation. And like, what are the ways to honor that energy in me and in others, and to co-create something? And so I define myself as a relationship anarchist, if I can use defining words. I'm hesitant on that. I've used monogamish in the past, or polyamory, all these new words. But relationship anarchy to me means that we co-create a relationship with each other in every moment, with
Yes.
each person uniquely.
Yes, absolutely.
And in some ways that means I'm holding my friend's hand as we walk down the street, but that's all the touch that we feel great about. But that really makes us feel closer, particularly as we walk dark and dangerous streets sometimes. Or maybe other people really that I meet at a conference or gathering, we share such special space and we may not see each other again, that we do engage sexually, but we do so ritualistically. And we recognize that this isn't the precursors to a marriage. It's just an appreciation of each other's bodies and an offering of energy and a one-time thing.
And the ritual aspect of it gives you the container that you need, right?
Exactly.
And not only to make it safe, but in containers, new things are born. Whether it's a little child, a literal child, or whether it's a new awareness, a new consciousness.
Yes, and that that container that you said. How many of us are taught how to create a sacred sexual ritual container?
Right.
I mean, how do we honor ourselves as liberated beings, so that first, just getting over the homophobia of the past decades and millennia, to recognize that we are all capable of loving all genders and beings,
right?
And then to recognize sex beyond just procreation, but as honoring the goddess. I just emerged actually from California witch camp, which is a gathering of our earth-based spirituality and the reclaiming tradition that Starhawk and others kind of helped found in the Bay Area in the 80s. And that's been a new awakening for me. I've been coming into that in recent years, kind of letting go of like my rigid atheistic materialism and kind of awakening to an animist love of life and an honoring of creation. In that so doing of earth healing rituals and land restoration, my form of earth-based spirituality, this witch camp also had like sacred love dens that they called bowers, which is an old pagan word for place in the forest where lovers meet. And there was workshops and tents actually built that had mattresses and blankets and all the necessary equipment for sexy time, so that people had a sacred space to go. Rituals were held there, and we all recognized that sexual energy can, should, and really is an offering to the goddess. Like, to make love to one another is to make love with God. If we're all images of the one, then we're all giving and receiving love with God all the time. Whatever that, I'm new to use the big G word, because I'm not into monotheistic white bearded man in the sky, but there's still a recognition of the oneness that we share. And so that witch camp experience really reaffirmed in me the benefits of these containers that people can set and communicate clearly. I mean, for years I've been teaching consent sexual based workshops so that men don't just touch women without asking, or that they ask as you go through stages, which, married couples don't need to do that after a certain amount of time, of course. But like, when you're courting and engaging with an area like touch, which many have such traumas or vulnerabilities around, these containers and settings and communication styles are so important. And I imagine really this work, not only in all that I just discussed as important and transformational on a personal level, but if we could heal sexually collectively.
Yes.
I see the way, Trump and others are acting on an international level as an incompetence, inept attitude of an unsatisfied and immature male ego.
Right.
Because like acting out these immature and pathologically adolescent images of women, the way he's talked about women is the way we treat the earth.
Right.
Healing those types of relationships sexually, I believe, can really transform the way we relate in our intimate partnerships, as well as in our intimate partnerships with humans and our intimate partnership with the earth. This has potential for me for not just healing households, but healing our collective energies.
Well, absolutely. And I want to go back to something you said about Eros.
Yes.
I'm thinking of my own book, Love in the Age of Ecological Apocalypse. And, I have a chapter in there, ensconced in Eros, bathed in beauty. And, Eros is that life force energy. Eros is passion. And it doesn't ever have to be acted on. But every interaction, everything we do, everything in our lives is a relationship. And Eros is there. And Eros is waiting to create, whether that means a great friendship or a great political action or whatever that is. Eros is waiting to create. And if we can, channel that Eros, or follow would be a better word, that Eros in relation to the earth, what would happen to us and what would happen to earth?
Right. There are 4 stages I've heard of how we show up in the world. To me, by me, through me, as me. So many people are operating on everything happens to me. I'm a helpless victim.
Yep.
And then much of the self-help scene is caught in by me. Like, we're a manifester, we're potentiator, we can do anything we want, infinite potential for no recognition of class and race and etc. But then through me can be like, we channel the God energy. Right. And then as me is that we are actually already the earth. Yes. We are already the God energy.
Absolutely.
That's what I hear you recognizing, is that we move into that new relationship of Eros. And that really hits me when recognizing Che Guevara's quote of, "At the risk of sounding absurd, let me say that all revolutionaries are guided by love."
Absolutely.
And so what he did in Bolivia and in Cuba, and what revolutionaries in all ways and all people do so much, I believe, is guided by love. And that could be, like the main energy, that we all do what we do because of love. Even deranged and criminals or whatever and evil politicians, are, if I can see deeply enough into them, that they are actually motivated by love. And so if we can heal the way we show up in our loving relationships, if we can heal eros, if we can still have love in the ecological apocalypse, then I'm okay to go down with my heart open.
I couldn't have said it better, Tyler. Thank you for that.
You helped give me the words for it.
Well, I go back to kind of the way Guy McPherson and I finished Extinction Dialogues. Only love remains. Only love remains. And everything we do is ultimately about love. And this is what I'm always emphasizing in the grief work that I do, is you grieve because that's love. Grief is love. You only grieve what you love. Yeah.
Yes. I think my mentor, Lawrence Cole. He's a songwriter out in Port Townsend, and based on that same idea, and with the William Blake quote from earlier, he has a short song that says, "If you want to get up to the joy, you have to go down deep. So go down, go down, go down. If you want to get up to the joy, you have to go down deep. So go down, go down, go down." And he wrote that after reading Charles Eisenstein's article from February 2016 called "By Ye Fruits Ye Shall Know Them," where he was at the Envision Festival in Costa Rica with all these cultural revolutionaries and new paradigm thinkers, and he was doing research for his new book at that same time on catastrophic climate change. He's trying to reconcile these new paradigm ways of being, relationships, permaculture, etc., with the feedback loops and the methane hydrate leaks and the deforestation. So if we are going to be authentic in our joy, if people are going to really be hippy dippy, excited new age, have they actually felt the despair? Have they actually looked at the pain of the world and the calamities for near-term human extinction? Because joy is not authentic.
This is what, this is what Andrew Harvey's and my book, Return to Joy, really emphasizes.
Yes.
You can only go as high as you are willing and able to go low.
Oh.
Yeah.
And yet it's at that same time that some in our communities that we share, I wonder can the despair be as authentic too if we haven't felt the joy?
Right.
We must go out onto the streets as you do and see the beauty in every person's eyes and every animal's eyes. To the work that you and Andrew do with pets, to feel the joy of relationship in all its forms, then the despair is actually authentic because we've actually felt this balance.
There has to be joy with the despair, or what's the point? And you will very quickly decide that we don't want to be here. Well, Tyler, how can folks contact you if they want to do that?
Wow. I'm really open to communicating with people around anything that popped up in this conversation, or links to any of the books and authors I mentioned. There's a few ways. Email is easy. Email would be revolutionbytruth@gmail.com, an old email address that I thought if only we told people the truth, that a total revolution would happen. And in some ways I still see that coming to be. And so revolutionbytruth@gmail.com. I have a phone number as well that I'm happy to chat with people. I much prefer conversations like this. Imagine if we tried to do this over text or email right now, Carolyn, so this is much preferred, but I still welcome initial communication through email. And then I'm also on Facebook. I'm in the CIA's personality database, pretty well weaved by now.
Yeah.
And that's just my full name, facebook.com/Tyler.Hess. I'm one of your friends on there as well, so people find me through you. Mm-hmm. I'd say those are the best ways. I'm open to receiving mail at Canticle Farm as well, 1972 36th Avenue, Oakland 94601. But yeah, I really want to use what I know to be of service, to young people, to people in intimate relationships going through transition, to people in dietary and nutritional situations, or people with gatherings that need head cooks. Like, I'm really here to serve. I mean, I've been gifted with so much beauty that it's only right for the cycle to continue.
Thank you so much, Tyler, for being with us again today, and thank you for the really important work that you're doing in the world. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and until next time, stay well, stay safe, and stay awake.